So throughout the last couple of days, whether you joined us or not, we've been working on an app called, it doesn't even have a name yet. It's an HR portal. And the idea is that you can create a job application or like a job listing, and then you can send out a form for applicants to apply to that job. All right. And so the first day in Softr, we went ahead and built our database. And so we have our user database here, which is where someone like Tom or me can log into the application and we're going to create new jobs that we want to hire for. So throughout the last then we have a table called job listings. And these are where the new jobs that are created, all the new jobs go in. So far we've said, okay, hey, we're hiring for a product designer and a software engineer. And maybe today we're going to be hiring for a automation consultant, something like that, right? And in the first lesson, we also set up some database agents and showed you how to use that. We also covered like linked fields and roll-up fields. The recording to that episode is on our YouTube channel. So if any of those terminology are unclear, it might be best to watch that recording because databases are really fundamental for how you set up your application and just getting the data right. All right, so beyond the database, we then moved into Softr interfaces. And here we used a vibe coding block to create this hero section. We used a quick links block to create a way to navigate around the application. And then we used a dynamic listing block. And that dynamic listing block brings us to the Softr database, the HR portal that we set up in the first session. Now, today we're going to do two things, or more than two things, but we're going to expand this use case, all right? Today, we are going to say, hey, when a application is submitted, we got to do a couple of things, all right? First, let's send the application an email or the applicant an email saying, hey, thanks for applying for this job, right? Then we also want to send a Slack message to us, Tom and I, saying, hey, we got a new applicant that just applied for this job. And then maybe we want to update the application to update the record to say, hey, you know, those automation ran and et cetera, and we kept it updated. So Tom is going to lead us through a fresh new build here at first, and then afterwards, I'm going to show you how we can go into Softr interfaces and make it so you could press a button, which will then kick off a workflow. And then while the workflow is running, show a wait screen to your user, and then depending on the results of the workflow, bring the user to the relevant page, okay? This is an interactive session. We are doing this in a group hangout format because we want to hear from you. We want to make friends with you. And generally, we're open to questions along the way. I think the best way to submit a question is just to raise your hand, and then we'll stop it and get to you as soon as we can. But other than that, Tom, I'm going to create a new workflow here, and I'm going to get started with a new workflow. But the first thing that we got to figure out, Tom, is what a trigger is. Can you just explain a little bit about this trigger?
Absolutely. So the anatomy, let's talk about the anatomy of a workflow or the anatomy of an automation if you're more familiar with a Zapier, Make, or other automation provider. The anatomy of an automation is really simple. There is a triggering event, which is something that happens inside of an application, which in this case is going to be the Softr database. So there's a new event that occurs inside of the Softr database that's going to begin the workflow. It's going to trigger the rest of the workflow to be able to occur. Now, when that trigger happens, it has a handful of data points from that trigger. So already you're able to see things like the record ID or different data points inside of, in this case, the Softr database. And the triggering event is so important to be really precise when you're thinking about what do I use the trigger, like what is the basis for my trigger. So if you have a trigger that's too lenient or too open or could be triggered accidentally, the rest of your automation is likely to run into failures and run into errors because it's going to try to utilize the wrong data or the wrong information to do, send the email or update the record or do whatever else you were trying to do in your action steps. So I'll get back to that in a second, but it's really important for your trigger to be focused, concise, and intentional, and have the data in it that you want to build the rest of the the rest of the automation with. Okay, so the second part in the anatomy of a workflow is going to be the action steps. So action steps would include searches and would include things like updates or any of these actions that are on JJ's screen right now. These are all actions. Now, different apps will have different abilities. Because Workflows is new to Softr, it doesn't have every available option through like you would through an API. But in the API, the application programming interface document that all of these pieces of software have, those are sort of the limitations of what actions can be inside of your workflow in this case. So these are all no-code supported workflow actions. So it's really easy to just like click one and then it works, right? If you're trying to do more complicated things, those would be, you would be able to program that under an API call. And an API call is just a little bit more sophisticated. You have to include parameters for your headers, your authentication. Different API calls will allow you to actually connect Softr Workflows to literally any public application that has an API. So that is sort of your catch-all if you're comfortable going the low-codey route. So it's super useful to be able to do that. But these baked-in functions like branches that JJ just clicked on, like those are really, really helpful ways of breaking up a workflow into really logical steps where you're going to have deterministic paths, right? It's clear if certain conditions are filled in a filter or a branch, then you're going to go down that path with the remaining actions inside of this workflow. You don't have a limit that I'm aware of, at least with actions. You could have 100 actions if you want to. I wouldn't recommend that. I would recommend trying to make it a little bit more modular. And then if you have to recursively call different workflows, if you want to connect them together, but that's a little bit more of an advanced topic. In this case, we're just going to focus on having a nice trigger that is clear and concise, has the data that we want. And then we're going to build the rest of these action steps to notify, JJ and myself, send an email, and then update a record. So hopefully that's a pretty good overview of the anatomy of a workflow here.
Crushed it. As you can see on my screen here, this is a branch. A branch is a very common flow. It essentially says, hey, go down this route if this condition is true. If not, go down this route, right? And in a very simple example here, I just said, hey, if the description is empty, go down this route. If not, go down this route, right? And then we can also replace these. We could delete these. And there's a lot of other things. Another thing that I want to call out is maybe the filter. A filter is a good one to say, hey, when this trigger goes, check to see if this is true. If so, proceed. If not, don't proceed. So a filter is a good thing to make sure that you're not spending more credits than you need to or running more workflows than you need to. Tom, did you have something there?
Just the inclusion of a filter is a really great way of narrowing the remaining, narrowing what will trigger the remainder of the automation. Sometimes in your database or sometimes in your trigger, you'll have to cast a really wide net. And you don't want the automation to run for every possible situation. So when you add a filter, it just reduces that. Sometimes you can't add a filter or more specificity to the trigger, and that's okay if you're really precise about how you use a filter. That'll just cost you 1 credit, right? Or one action there, like on the trigger, but that's okay. Great question, I think, from Monty. JJ, I think that one's for you, though. How many steps or how are credits actually calculated on the automation?
Yeah, I think I'll be able to show you once we get this, because you can go in the runs and you could see how many credits are being used for each run. I believe it's like 1 credit per step, but I honestly, this is so new, I'm still learning myself. So let me table that question and come back to it. Why don't we continue on with the flow here, Tom?
Sure.
And the first flow would be sending an email. Okay, so we just want to send an email to the applicant thanking them for applying. So Tom, how would we go about doing that one?
Let's do it. We're going to click that big fat plus button, and then we're going to go to the left and use a Gmail step.
Yep.
So if you haven't connected your Gmail to Softr yet, it'll ask you to actually authenticate and connect your Gmail here. We're just going to use the send email step. And, you can have multiple Gmail accounts. If you, want HR emails to come from one person on your team and sales emails to come from another person on your team, you could actually have those 2 accounts and, set up that branch as JJ showed earlier. So for our 2, this is going to be dynamic. So like I talked about before, in the trigger, you actually get a whole bunch of data that comes along with the trigger. You can see and view all of that data here. And the email variable, like that email little token on the left, that is a variable. And every time the automation runs, or every time the workflow runs, that'll be dynamic. So what we're going to do in step 2 is actually place the variable of email, and we see a little preview of what the trigger, captured in the test, which in this case is JJ's email. So the concept here that's really, really important is that your trigger has test data. That test data has variables, and as you build the rest of the automation, you're going to be inserting those variables and not hard coding, which we'll do right here in the subject line, right? Hard coding, thanks for applying. And that will run for every time the workflow runs. That text will be identical, but the email variable will change every single time the workflow is triggered. Does that make sense for everybody? Because that's like the real core value of setting up a workflow, is to be able to mix that dynamic and static data.
Yep. In an example here, I have the static data mixed with a variable data. So it's saying, thanks for applying, JJ. Thanks for applying, Tom. Whatever the data that comes through the trigger will appear here in this way, right? And Softr makes it really easy now to add variables. You could just put in the @ sign. And you just put in the @ sign, and then you would see the variables come up here. Or you can also just click on the @ sign there, okay? So far, we're sending this email to whatever applicant applies. We're sending it back to them. And then we're saying, hey, thanks for applying. X variable, JJ, whatever.
Yeah.
And then we can include whatever body we want into this. And for this example, we're just going to keep it simple and says, thank you for applying. And then maybe just to show one more example of a variable use case, I'll go in there and just like put the job title for like the label of like, hey, they applied for this job kind of thing. And then we could choose if we want to add a CC, a BCC, or reply to. But I think this is good for now. I do want to call out one thing to your attention here. This little icon here means that we need to proceed with the testing in order for this to go through, this data to go through and proceed on to the next step. And so in Softr, we have 2 options here. Tom, maybe explain what the 2 options that we could do here.
Yeah. So this is really important, especially when you're sending an email. So when you're actually doing something that goes outside of you, in this case, sending an email to some third party, it is far safer, and probably you'd be more comfortable, right, using a mock test, because you don't actually want to send a test email to somebody if you forgot punctuation or you weren't using the real example. So in this case, JJ clicked mock test, which is just going to show you, the builder, the information. So you get to see, oh, this is what it would do if I ran a real test. But because we're sending an email, we really don't want to actually send a real test. If you're doing a different type of action, like in the database, you actually want to see what a calculation might do, or what you want to see a field update, then a real test would be appropriate, because then it's not going to affect anyone outside of you and your laptop. So you do a real test, and then you can see the data change if you were to do an update record, which we'll get to in a bit. But having the 2 options, so nice, because the mock test just really saves you the embarrassment of sending somebody an email that is half drafted. Yeah. Right. So yeah, keep that in mind. I've made that mistake more times than I care to admit.
It comes with the territory, but hopefully we could save you from that mistake. You'll also see that this is now green. That means, hey, we're good to go. The data from this step will now pass on to other steps, and we can create our next step. And so in this next step, we want to notify our team internally that, hey, there's a new application. And you could do this a couple of different ways. The way that we're going to do this for this example is we're going to use Slack. But again, you could create, send another Gmail action to send us an email internally. We could look to create like a calendar event to like schedule their interview. There's a lot of things that we could do here. And it's up to you as the builder. Now with this power at these tools at your hands, you could do whatever you want. for this example, we're just going to say, hey, let's send a Slack message to us internally. And so for that, we could choose, hey, do you want to post a channel message, a direct message? In this situation, I'm just going to post a direct message. And I've already connected my Slack account to this. So I'm going to use my Slack account there. And we get to search by a specific user. And in this case, I'm going to email or DM just myself. And I'm going to essentially say, hey, we have a new application for the job, and then variable job name. And then it's going to be, and now you can see I have access to data from both of the previous steps, right? And so as we grow, we continue to get access to all those steps. But in this case, I still just need access for the first step. So that, and then it's going to be job title, and it's going to be hiring for production designer. And then we could say the applicant name is, and then we could do this, and we say name, and their email is, right? And then boom, 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 boom. So we can do this however we want. It's up to us. And there's also a lot of cool things that we could do here too. Like, for example, we can add a step here, like an AI step, where maybe we go search the internet and find out more information about this applicant, right? We could scrape a web page, we could search the internet or whatever. And then we can kind of build a workflow where it kind of auto checks this applicant of like who they are, would they be a good fit for this, all this kind of stuff, and then essentially update the record or send that information to you here. So like you can use a lot of things in this automation tool to build whatever you need to help enhance what you're looking for. And so while this is a simple automation use case, I'm just trying to show you some of the things that could be done for you to expand this. Question from Lindsay. First off, Lindsay, good to see you again. Thanks for being here. The question is, could the AI go to a web page and find a biopic from the page, perhaps a bit specific, but so it could, like, for an example, it could go find their LinkedIn page, scrape that information, return it. I don't think you're going to be able to get to a point where you can grab their image and bring it back. That's quite difficult still, but you can certainly search the internet about anything relevant around this person and kind of bring all that data back and then tell AI, hey, here's the job description, here's all the information, help us make a predetermination of could this be a good fit to proceed on or not, kind of thing. So there's a lot you could do there. So Nilsson, we cannot send a message to WhatsApp natively. However, we could do that with the call API. As Tom was saying, this call API allows you to trigger any API, and WhatsApp has a very good API, right? And the way that I would think about using a API, especially as like a first-time learner, is I would go to the API documents for WhatsApp. So for example, like WhatsApp API documents, I would find that wherever it is. And then I would find something like the call that I'm looking for and send that to ChatGPT and say, hey, I'm looking to set up this call here. Help me through it. You know, what kind of parameters do I need? What, all that kind of stuff. And maybe ChatGPT can help you set up that call for the first time. I use it a lot with my API integrations, and it's very helpful. So yeah, go for it.
Just on the WhatsApp note, WhatsApp in particular can be difficult to work with. So when we've done WhatsApp oriented automations, normally it's actually through either Twilio or AirCall. Both of those voice over IP providers provide WhatsApp integrations, and their APIs are just a bit easier to work with. So it feels a little abstracted to go to a third-party service instead of just going through WhatsApp directly. But because of the you might not want it to be on your personal account versus the company account, and there's just some nuances around handling WhatsApp authentication directly, and Twilio and AirCall tend to make it a little bit easier. But you would absolutely still end up using that API call action inside of Softr Workflows to be able to trigger those things.
Awesome. So we have just about all of this set up here. If I want to go and just mock test this again, good, we're proceeding. Now I do want to add just one final step, and this step, it's a really simple step and maybe we don't even need it, but I just want to show you how it could be done because in workflows, there's a lot of times where you have a record and then you make some changes here and then you need to update that same record. I just want to make sure to show you how we do that. So for this, we'd go and grab a new action. Again, that record, that trigger is Softr Databases. And so now what we're going to do is instead of add a record, we're going to update that record, okay? And we're going to go and grab the same database that we used initially, so our applications. And now we have two options here. We can select record ID from a previous step, which is what we want to do, because this step gives us the record ID. And the record ID is a unique identifier saying, hey, which record are we using? And in this sense, it's going to be a record ID. So I could just go in there, go record added, and I see at the very top, that's the ID. And now what this will do is it will take the ID of whatever dynamic record is here and then pull that ID here so you can update the information from this, right? And so this would be easy. We could choose which fields we want to update. You know, in this case, we could just say, you know, the status field, and then we click on it and we could just say, you know, something along the lines of submitted or whatever, right? And then we can go to testing and we could test it out. That worked. And now this flow is ready to go live. Now, I think that's, yeah, it's ready to go live. Tom, anything else you want to add on to this flow?
Well, so I'm torn between two things. One is if you could actually just go back to the trigger and click on the test data for me. Just want to see here.
What are you looking for?
I was thinking about reconstructing the URL of the database record so that you could click and go directly to the database and see the full record in the Slack message. That's a trick that you can do with the table ID and the ID of the record. We could probably do a variation of that. Would you mind actually just going to the database?
Yep.
The database for that. Yeah, pop open the data and then
1 second, I got to get to the actual database view.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep. And then open up one of the records.
It doesn't open like that, but what we could do is, yeah, because it doesn't give the detail view yet, Tom.
Yeah. That's just fine. So, well, actually, just copy the full URL.
Okay, up here.
Yep. And now inside of the workflow in the Slack message, if you use the syntax, I do this too often. You put the URL and then a pipe and then, you know, the text. I'll just put it in the chat there. If you do that, so paste that and then exactly swap out the table ID and you can delete the view. That doesn't really matter. And then just say, you know, view in Softr, add a pipe at the end of that.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Right, like this?
Yep, and then put a pipe after table ID.
Okay.
That's the vertical line. Yep, and then just say view in Softr, exactly. And then if you that's perfect. So then if you continue or send that message or preview that message, you'll see the view in Softr text will be hyperlinked with the full Softr database URL with the variable of the table ID, so that you'll go right there. And this is one of the things that's super nice about the variables that they include by default, the system variables that are included by default in Softr database records, is that you get the IDs to be able to reconstruct the URL like that, so you can just go to where you want to go, right? If you're in Slack, you're like, oh, let me view all the things, right? Because you don't want to map every individual data point that you have for this person. You just want to go to the Softr database to be able to view the record in full there. So it's a little bit of an advanced trick, but once you kind of get the hang of it, especially with the Slack, you know, syntax of the open and close brackets, it just makes life a lot easier, right? What is it like for your team to work with this stuff? Because the majority of people on your team aren't really going to care that you built this in Softr, or that you're building a workflow, or that whatever it is. They're gonna want to interact with it, right? And by including the URL in line with the Slack message, it just makes it easier for them to actually work with, you know, the workflows that you're building.
Yeah, a great point there. It's just a very easy and handy way to just reference back to that. So if you want to see more data, it's easy done. And because you're doing it in a Slack message, it's internal for your team in that sense, or for the scenario that we have present here. So I'm going to turn this on. That means as soon as I turn it on, that this is actually live, and it will be monitoring for these new records. Okay. So I'm going to turn it on, and then we're going to go into our interface, and we're going to test it and just see how it goes.
Let's do it.
Anytime you create a new workflow, you got to test it, right? You can't just turn it on and then go off for break. You got to test it. It's part of being a developer now and a builder. So I'm going to go into our interface. We are in our interface here, and we need to go to the application form for the product designer, okay? So now we're going to fill out a new application for our product designer role, okay? So my name for this is going to be Tom, because we haven't added him to our database yet. Tom at friendly.com, and then he's going to be at Google, and then I am a workflow professional. All right, and now we're going to submit this, and everything looks good on this part. And now what we could do is we can go back to home here, and now we can go back to our workflows, and we could just refresh the page to see if any new runs come in. All right, so 1 second.
The one important note as we're waiting for this to come through is that you see the little 1 minute above the record added. This is called a polling interval. So as you work with other triggers, the polling interval will be different. So webhooks are a different way of triggering an automation. Those are instant. You can think of those as like robots ringing the doorbell, right? When something happens, you push that button somewhere else, bing, it begins the automation. Things that have a polling interval check every so often, and in this case, that was a minute, right? Every so often for the new information to appear inside of your triggering application. So if you're basing your trigger on Airtable or Google Sheets or somewhere else, those polling intervals will be slightly longer, and you should just be aware of that as you're doing testing, because sometimes you're like pulling your hair out. You're like, why isn't this running? It's supposed to watch this thing, and it didn't run yet. And it's just because the polling interval is longer than what you would maybe naturally expect of it being instant. And that's okay. Those polling intervals will decrease over time, and you'll be able to speed things up over time. But just keep that in mind as you use different triggers. Different triggers will have different polling intervals. Webhooks are the only ones that are instant. And when you're building your automation, keep that in mind when you're testing.
Yeah, fantastic point. I think Softr Databases offers some of the fastest polling, but then it's different for everyone. I did want to show you the results of that automation that succeeded. So I got a message from Softr saying, hey, we have a new application, Tom at tomfriendly.com, and then we could view it in Softr here, kind of thing, right? So that's excellent. That worked. Let's move on. I have a couple more things that I want to show you guys. And the first part is how we could build this with AI next. Okay, so the first part is we could see our runs here. Okay, this is important. We could see every time that this runs, and then we can go in here and also see the data that was ran there and double check our work here. Now this was 4 steps, and so I assume that's just 4 credits in that way. Let me follow up after the call and build week and just like get some more clarification there, because again, this is brand new and I'm still learning myself. But otherwise, we have our runs there. This workflow is live. Let's do another thing. Let's go and create a new workflow, and we're going to do the same thing. Okay, and you'll understand why in a minute. So we have record added here. Look at that, 1 minute polling, or when record meets condition, that's instant. This is a good example of maybe like when we're looking to see if an application status is ever updated to published. If so, we could use this trigger of like, we don't need to check in every new application. We only need to check when their status for that application is published. We would check this, right? But for this example, I just want to say record added. And then we could pull up our friendly AI builder here. And for this, we could say, create an automation where when a new record is added, we send an email via Gmail, then we send a Slack message, and then we update the record. pleased. All right. And now our AI could help us start this off. It's thinking for us. I would say generally the results have been pretty good. It lays out the general foundation and helps you think about stuff. And it's a good also first step to see like, hey, this is how I'm thinking about it. How does the AI think about it? And they can map it out for us as well. It's going to finish up here and then you'll see the results in just a couple of seconds. Let's see. Boom, there we go. So everything we just did there, AI recreated for us. We do need to go in and just verify the data, but those steps were added and it was able to proceed with it for us. So the AI builder is really, really helpful. And we're starting to introduce the AI builder in every one of our products. And it's now in workflows. Soon it's going to be in databases and then interfaces. And then soon it will connect it all together. So you can ask the AI in one and it will do everything for you. So excellent. So we have the AI builder now. Now the next thing that I want to show you is new record AI demo. We'll just save that quick. Is the interface action point part of it. Okay. Now this takes a little bit longer to get set up, but it's very important and powerful and will unlock a lot of functionality for you during build week. Okay. So the trigger for this would be, let's see, Softr apps. And Softr apps is essentially software interfaces in this way. And we want the trigger to be when a workflow is ran. And we can see that this is an instant trigger. And what we mean by run a custom workflow, this is a button that you can click in Softr interfaces. So Softr interfaces is the one actually triggering this workflow to run. Okay. So now we see a new screen for the first time. This is our run custom workflow. And then we have show wait screen here. This essentially means that we can show our users in Softr interfaces a wait screen while this workflow runs, and then we direct the user to the place that we want them to. So the end user interaction, we can choose a lot of certain things. We can just show them a simple success message, or we can bring them to a new page. We can open a different page. We just got to choose what application we are sending them to, what page we're sending them to, right? And then open in what kind of area. And so this would be the same tab is the same browser tab is what we're talking here. All right. So now we can go in and build some workflow information about this. Now, we've been using the HR portal example, okay? And so whenever we go and create a new job listing here, we have the ability to create something new. But let's say we want to enhance the information that we are adding to our job description. So when we go to add a new job description, I'm going to put like name and status and description. But what if we want the AI to go and like enrich that description for us and just add a lot more things to this job description to like fill it out so the user doesn't need to? So we can create an example where once we have a job description here, we can just press a button that will trigger our workflow. And then depending on if the job needs to be enriched or not, it will either enrich it or it will not enrich it. Okay, so let me show you what this looks like. First, in Softr interfaces, we're going to go and add a new button here. And in Softr interfaces, to add a new button, we need to go to actions. And we want to use a item button because the item button allows us to send the data for the related item to the workflow. So it's going to be item button, run custom workflow. And this is going to be enrich, just so we can see it, job description. And then I'm going to put a little magic wand, there we go, magic wand to show us that this is with AI. And then we can select which workflow we want to run. And in this case, I actually don't even know what it is. Updated workflow 12, and it's going to be enrich HR portal. Okay, so that's great. So we can select that one right there. And then we want to send data to that workflow, right? And the data that we want to send to that workflow is the related item. So that way we know which item to enhance, okay? So the key that I'm going to do is I'm going to do ID, and the value is the selected record ID, all right? And so I'm going to go here, and it's going to be, I don't have ID yet, and that's something that I actually want to add to make it a little bit easier for me. And so in order to add that, I'm going to go into my database here, and I have a job listing, and I'm going to go and create a new field, and this is going to be record ID, and it's just going to be record ID. And now it's going to give me the record ID for this row. And remember, the record ID is a unique thing for the row or for the data. It makes it really easy to find it. So I could have like maybe searched for it or whatnot, but there is potential faults in that because maybe two items have the same name, right? So in this case, now we have the record ID, and I do just need to refresh this quick. So I'm going to go back to my source. I'm just going to refresh this, and I'm going to continue here. So enrich job description, run custom workflow. We now have the enrich HR portal. We now can go in here and select the record ID. And then we could do one more thing. We could do a description. We're going to send the data that we want to send, and we're going to send that, and it's going to be description right there. Okay. So now what it's telling us is we have, when we press this button, we're going to trigger this workflow, and we're going to send data to that workflow, which we can use in the later steps of the workflow. So remember, we want to be able to use more information here for the related record. So what we now can do is say, okay, we need to test this workflow, and we need to, so that way we can pass that data. This is very similar to like when you trigger and do a test event, you pass the data in that way. And so I'm going to do a test event here. We didn't find anything. The way that we have to do this with Softr Workflows is we go in and we preview, okay? And we have a button here. It's called Enrich Job Description. And it's telling us the workflow that we're trying to trigger has been published yet, okay? So we actually need to turn this on just to get this data to send through. And then we're going to try it again here. We're going to go back in here, and we're going to say, okay, enrich job description. And now just a moment, that's kind of the wait screen that we'd see. The workflow has been completed. Now we can come back to this workflow, and we can, I'm pretty sure, well, let's get the test again. And now we see the data coming through from Softr interfaces to Softr Workflows. We sent the description and we sent the ID. This now means that we have this data to do what we want with it in the latter steps. So Tom, my thought is that we could take this description and send it to AI to create a very handy short description for us that we can use in like the detail page when we just want to show a short description rather than showing the very long description in the interface. In order to do that, what steps might I take to send this description to AI?
Well, you could do it in a couple different ways. The first way is actually in the workflow. You could have in the Softr AI step. So in this case, I think this is probably the most efficient way to do it is to bake the AI into the workflow itself, where you pick one of those there, actually write it, pick your model and give it instructions. The other way to do it, which is again less efficient in this particular scenario, but might be a good way to do AI enrichment for your for like the candidates database, is to actually do the AI enrichment as a new field inside of the database. So you do have both options there, where you could actually create a new field here inside of the database, and then create a new AI agent that does something, and that's a whole other, live stream with JJ talking about, databases and stuff. But you should know that you have the option to do both. And it is the same AI. You have the same access to the models. You have the same, ability to add web search or to give it instructions. So it's kind of tomato, but in this case, it's easier. Think about, again, yourself working on this system. If there's enrichment happening that is part of an automation, you should see it inside of the automation. You shouldn't, delay for 2 minutes and then refetch the record right inside of the database to then pull, what hopefully ran inside of the database in an AI step. So you have the option here. I think is the right place to do it.
Cool. Yeah, that's exactly it. So I just gave it a quick little description. Hey, shorten this to be good for a recruiter to see. I fed it the long description because you got to give it the information that it actually needs to shorten, right? I chose this model. This is a really fast performant model, and it's quite affordable. I don't need to actually search the web, so I'm going to leave that off. And I'm just going to test this, and it's going to take that long description and just summarize it for us. So now we have the results. Here it is. Now, what we want to do with that result is update the record in our database, because if we don't save this result anywhere, it's not going to be you can't use it again. So now we're going to go in Softr Databases. We're going to update record. And remember, I passed the record ID here. That's going to make it really easy to get here. So HR portal, job listings, and then select record from previous step. Great. I already sent that record. So that record is going to be that ID right there. And then for this, we're going to go in and go short description. And we're going to reference the AI response, the result right there. And that's going to update that short description. All right. And then I'll just update this. That worked successfully. Fantastic. Now, the final step is I want to send this user to the detail page. And this is a very important thing because it's a little bit more technical. So I just wanted to make sure that I showed you on the call so you could figure out how this is done. So when we go to a detail page in Softr, we're going to go back here that ran in that workflow. We'll go to view job listing. Okay. You see up here, and I can't really zoom in on this, but you see up here, we have this URL. Okay. And this is the main URL. And right now you'll see that you're in your test environment. Okay. If you're not in the test environment, it won't say preview. Again, test environment means that only Tom and I can see this. It's not available to the world, right? Beyond that, we have the page that we're on, job listings page. And then we send the data for that page right here. This record ID, it's essentially saying, hey, what data do we need to send to this page to fill this out? And because this is a detail page, it's just selecting one item. So we need to send the record ID for the page that we want to go to, for the data that we want to view, to that page. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this. I'm going to copy this URL, and I'm going to copy it all the way up until the record ID, because this we're going to make variable with the workflow record ID that we receive. But all this other stuff we're going to copy, and we're going to bring it into our application, and we're going to say, okay, we got to go to this page. And we're going to go to actually, let's see, it's the job listing detail page. And for this, we're going to go to, actually, not that, we're going to go to open URL. Sorry about that. And we're going to add our URL that we want to go to. So it's going to be this URL. And then we're going to add a variable. And that variable is going to be the record ID, right? And we got that record ID right here. And so now this will bring you to the detail page for that record that we're seeing, okay? And it's going to happen in the same page. And I am just going to, let's see, I think that should be good. I'm going to update this. I'm going to publish it. And then I want to do one more thing for you. Now, in our job description page, right now, we see that we have a couple of fields here. We have the application, the description, but we don't actually show the short description. And I want to make sure we show the short description because right now that should be empty, okay? So we're going to go here. And we'll go back over here. We'll get to a live product here. We'll view the product description, and short description should be empty. So, oh, actually it's not empty because we had filled it for that record. Let me try another record. Right here, we'll go here, hiring for software engineer. So right here, this is the short description that is empty, okay? And so I want to go in here, and again, we can adjust the way that this is coming through, but I want to show a short description here. And let's see, textile formatting. I think this is fine for now. This is fine for now. And then what we're now going to do is we're going to go back, we're going to refresh, and then we're going to launch this workflow and see how it goes. So home. And then we're going to say, okay, we need to enrich the software short description for the software engineer. If we go into our database, we see that the software engineer does not have a short description right now, okay? So now if we click on software engineer, enrich job description, it's going to launch that workflow. That workflow is now running in the background. It's enriching it, and then it's going to bring us to the detail page for that. And now we have the short description here. And now we can go back to our database and look at that is filled in. And now we just completed multiple steps here, allowing the user to do an action and then to proceed accordingly. Now, there's a couple of things that I want to recap on here. First off, I don't love the way that this is being formatted. So to adjust that, I would go into Softr Workflows and I would tell this AI step, hey, just return like plain text formatting. Like it's formatting it like in different ways. We just adjust the formatting there. Or we could just say, hey, that short description is actually still quite long. Let's adjust that as well. So we can make that adjustment. We can update that record, right? Also, there's another way that you could think about this. We could create a branch and essentially say, hey, whenever the short descript, whenever the, let's see, I'm going to say like whenever the short description is empty, proceed down this path. And whenever it's not empty, just bring the user to the page, right? So we're that way we're saying, hey, if it's empty, we need to do some work here and then bring them to the page. If it's not empty, just bring them to the page. But you can use the same button for the same thing. Okay. And in this case, the way that we would do that is we need to actually find that record. So I'd go into databases. I would find the record. And the record that I want to find is the job listing. And then we'd say the record ID is the result of step 1, which is the record ID here. All right. We would search that. We would test that. That brings back that record ID. Now we can use that in this step, which is essentially saying when the short description is empty, proceed down this path. And when the short description, right here, short description is not empty, proceed down this path, right? And so that way we can have that button and it can handle both use cases for us depending on the data of the user.
There's a couple things, JJ, that you did. I mean, you were zipping through here, right? Obviously, you're pretty comfortable with this this new interface, right? But there were a couple things that you did that I just want to like re-highlight for everybody. The first thing was you noticed as JJ was building, in particular the show wait screen step, he conducted that behavior. He triggered the automation, and then he needed to go back and click test again. So sometimes you'll do something to get new data or to run the automation to test it, and you'll need to actually click test again in some steps to re-pull the new information. So expect that behavior, right? If something changes somewhere else, you're going to need to click retest. And that's so that you can kind of freeze frame the information that you're working with, right? And that makes it a lot easier to build, because if something is happening outside and you don't know that, and then all of a sudden you're in workflow information is changing, that can be really confusing. So be comfortable with clicking test again. So long as you're doing a mock test and not a real test, that's a very safe thing to do.
Yeah. And in this case, it's just pulling in the latest data from your latest run, right? And this is still a little new in the sense that it seems a little weird to launch this live in order to get the test data. I think we're still working on that, so you can do this when you don't have to do that. But in the meantime, right now, you do have to turn this live. So that way in your preview environment, you can send that test data, and then you go and press test again, and then that test data will appear there, okay?
Yeah. The other thing that I just want to point out as a parallel, right? We just, earlier in this session, we reconstructed the URL in the Slack message to send the person to the database, right? We did that same trick here on the front end. So we did that by we grabbed the whole URL, right? And we put the ID of the record that we want them to see. The URL bar is a treasure trove of little tricks like this. So be aware of how the URLs are constructed. Softr is extremely intentional in how they structure record IDs and put the URL together, so you can reconstruct that and really design a great experience for the people that are using your app.
Yep. I will say that right now there is with workflows, it's not as smart as I would like it to be. It's being worked on now. What I mean by that is you have to dynamically put in preview. You have to statically put this in. So right now, this workflow, if you push it live, will send you to the preview page for the detail page. And that's not what you want, right? So in this case, we would need to go in and remove that preview to send it to the live page once we're ready to go live. Now, we are working literally currently, and maybe in the next day or two, this will be fixed and just happen automatically for you. But in the meantime, you do need to, when you're constructing this URL, take in mind the environments that you're in. When we're testing, we need to be in the preview environment. When we're not testing, we need to be in the real environment. And maybe this would even look like something like, jjangler.com, and then something like that with your custom domain. That's fine too. Whether you're using a custom domain or not, those same URLs will both work for you.
The other question there is about error handling. Can you show just where the errors are and how you sort of observe and triage error runs?
So something like we use a different toast message. What are you talking about?
No, we're talking about like if you had a custom API call
Okay.
and that API call was formatted poorly and it actually errored out on that API call step, where would you see that and how would you know?
Yeah, so it's a good question. I think there's still improvements to be made here. First, you would have to do the test event and send that test data. And if there is an error there, it will let you know. Ideally, you get past this and that's fine. The next step is, all right, it's going to show up in your workflow runs and you'll see if anything errored out because this step will be like a red step and it will show you what error happened and why. Now, the thing that I think we're still adding into the product in the next week or two is alerts for when these errors happen, right? In that case, when an error happens, the workflow will just halt. And actually, the errors might already be there or not. I haven't actually experienced it yet, but that's the final step of this is you'll see it in the test, you'll see it in the runs, and then you'll get an email alert that there was an error in your workflow and you need to go and fix that as well. And then once you go and fix that, you'll see the data that went through and maybe why that error existed. And then in some cases, it might just be because the data that you were trying to send didn't exist, meaning the value was null. It was empty, right? And in that situation, maybe you want to add a filter step to only run when the data is not empty, right? Or maybe it was just an error and you allowed a user to submit without actually filling in that data. And then that step, maybe in the interface, you need to make that a required field. So there's a lot of nuances to this, and it is a more powerful step that we're showing you here. But with that power, you can do a lot. And I did want to make sure that you saw this flow for Build Week as you're continuing to build your application and need a little bit more flexibility to maybe create the flows that you might need to create.
Awesome.
Cool. So that brings us to an end here. We created an automation from scratch. We created an automation with AI, and then we created an automation that connected Softr interfaces to Softr Workflows. Again, Softr Workflows is a really powerful tool. You can use it as a standalone product, meaning if you just need an automation to process once a new email is received, and then you're going to like auto summarize it and then save it to a database or send you an email, you can use it as a standalone. And then if you want to use it to enhance your software application, you can use that as well. So one Softr subscription gets you access to an automation product, a database product, and an interface product, and a form builder. And you can use those any way that you want for any of your business. And the goal is that you're able to use this to automate, to save data, to create apps, to collect information in any kind of a la carte way that you want that is helpful for your business. And I think generally these skills are really important. Every product almost has a workflow builder these days, and it's a very similar terminology. We have a trigger, we have action steps, and things happen, right? And so you now knowing these skills, you can go into nearly any automation tool or any other tool that has workflows within it and start to build those workflows because it's a very similar terminology and concept that you just learned, and then that we also have available in Softr. So Tom, as we go to sign off, anything that we forgot here, any kind of information that you want to share for people that want to work with you or anything like that, feel free to add it here.
Yeah, I think we covered quite a bit of ground. I'm not gonna pile on to the pile of learning here, but I would say if any of you would like to connect or talk offline about any questions or really specific situations that you'd like my input on, I pasted a link in the chat. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. That's probably the best place to reach out to me.
And in the Slack channel, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I am in Slack too. If you're in the
Build Week.
Softr, Build Week Slack, I'm there. Really happy to help and see everybody grow and build some awesome stuff.
Yep. Awesome. Tom, thank you for being here. Again, Tom has been building in this space for a long time. He is a wealth of knowledge, and he's also gone on to create a really successful automation agency. So Tom, hats off to you for that. Thanks for being here and sharing your knowledge with everybody. Otherwise, thank you for being here. You guys are crushing it. You're showing up day after day. You're making progress in your applications. It's excited to see each of you level up each day, and I hope you're enjoying it. I will see you in the Build Week channel, and thanks again for being here, guys.